Something's happening behind the scenes, something that even Washington didn't see coming. At first glance, it looks like just another round in the never-ending tariff fight between the US and Canada, but the moves Mark Carney just made, the timing of his budget, and the quiet signals coming from Ottawa suggest a much bigger game is in play. The headlines all focused on Trump's new tariff threats, the social media posts, the usual noise. But while the US president was rallying his base, Carney was already positioning Canada's economy for a countermove that might completely shift the balance of power in this trade standoff. And the wild part? He did it without ever saying Trump's name. When Carney stood in front of reporters yesterday to announce his first full budget as prime minister, the tone was calm, almost too calm. No shouting, no chest beating, no direct response to Washington's latest tariff announcement. But look closely at the numbers he laid out. The sudden increase in export credit funding, the push for domestic manufacturing incentives, the new clean energy transition fund tied to key U.S. supply chains. None of this was random. Every line looked like it had been designed with surgical precision, a quiet map for how to trap an economy that's been trying to trap Canada. For months, Trump has been insisting that tariffs are the only way to force Ottawa to play fair. Yet the so-called tariff pressure has already started to boomerang back into the American heartland. Farmers in the Midwest, manufacturers in Michigan, and auto parts suppliers in Ohio are watching their input costs rise. Meanwhile, Carney's team has been offering targeted tax breaks and export subsidies to lure some of those very industries north of the border. Not a public fight, not an angry exchange, just a slow, deliberate redirection of capital. What makes this moment fascinating is that no one in Washington seems to realize it yet. Trump's advisors are treating this like a traditional tariff battle. Slap duties, wait for retaliation, negotiate later. But Carney's strategy looks more like a chess match than a boxing match. Instead of punching back immediately, he's building a structure around the U.S. economy, a network of policies, investments, and diplomatic side deals that make Canada indispensable. It's not loud, but it's effective. Sources close to Ottawa insiders have hinted that the new budget's cleantech spending isn't just about climate targets. It's about ownership. By investing heavily in battery processing plants, rare earth minerals, and EV component manufacturing, Canada now controls parts of the supply chain that U.S. firms desperately need to meet their own production targets. So when Trump raises tariffs, he's indirectly taxing his own manufacturers. That's the hidden leverage Carney just created, and it's why analysts are quietly calling this the tariff trap. Here's where things get even more intriguing. Buried deep in the budget documents, there's language about trade-neutral adjustment credits. On paper, it sounds like bureaucratic jargon, but what it really means is that Ottawa can offset the cost of any new U.S. tariffs with direct financial support to Canadian exporters, effectively nullifying Washington's leverage. And because the credits are framed as part of a broader economic stabilization plan, the U.S. can't easily challenge them under existing trade agreements. If that's not strategy, what is? Some economists have begun whispering that Carney is using his central bank background to wage an entirely different kind of trade war, one based on currency flows and capital incentives rather than tariffs and tweets. The Canadian dollar's recent movements haven't been accidental. They've been controlled, almost guided, to absorb the shock of U.S. policy swings. When Trump's tariffs push the U.S. dollar up, Canada quietly benefits by making its exports cheaper abroad. It's a balancing act that keeps the economy stable while the U.S. scrambles to adjust. And yet, through it all, Carney maintains the image of calm, technocratic leadership. No fire, no fury, just facts, figures, and an unshakable confidence that makes it nearly impossible for opponents to paint him as reactionary. That's what unnerves Washington the most. Because Trump thrives on confrontation. He wants the spectacle, the soundbite, the conflict. Carney's silence denies him all of that. There was a moment during the budget presentation, small, almost unnoticed, where Carney paused before discussing the projected surplus. He looked straight into the camera and said, "Canada's strength lies in stability, not escalation." For most viewers, it sounded like a line about fiscal policy. But to anyone paying attention to the trade dispute, it felt like a message aimed squarely at the White House. And here's something else that's been overlooked: the timing of the budget. Releasing it just days after Trump's tariff escalation wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. It allowed Carney to frame the entire discussion around Canada's long-term resilience rather than short-term retaliation. That single act shifted public perception from victimhood to control. Suddenly, the question wasn't how will Canada survive, but how is Canada already winning? Even the markets reacted differently this time. Instead of panic, investors saw opportunity. The dollar barely flinched, stocks held steady, and analysts noted a surge in foreign capital inflows to Canadian infrastructure funds. Someone out there believes Carney knows exactly what he's doing, and they're betting billions on it. Of course, none of this has been officially confirmed. Ottawa hasn't issued any statement linking the budget strategy directly to U.S. tariffs. But when you connect the dots, the funding priorities, the new trade credit programs, the focus on supply chain sovereignty, it paints a picture that's hard to ignore. A picture of quiet, calculated retaliation disguised as responsible governance. Trump, meanwhile, continues to frame the tariffs as a patriotic act, America first, protecting American jobs. But if Carney's long game works, those same tariffs could end up strengthening Canada's economy while hollowing out U.S. manufacturing leverage. It's the definition of a political trap. Everything looks like a win until it's too late to escape. Even inside the U.S., a few industry voices are beginning to sound the alarm. Trade associations have warned the administration that Canada's policy shifts are making cross-border investment more attractive up north. A single percentage point in corporate tax differentials might not seem like much until you pair it with export credits, clean energy grants, and a currency advantage. That's when businesses start quietly relocating. So where does this go next? That's the million-dollar question. Some observers expect Trump to double down, expanding tariffs into sectors like agriculture or aerospace. Others think he might pivot toward negotiation once the economic feedback loop becomes clear. But whatever happens, it's becoming obvious that Carney has anticipated every move. His team's messaging stays consistent, the data releases are tightly timed, and the budget rollout has already set the narrative. Canada isn't retreating, it's adapting. What makes this entire situation so compelling is that it feels like watching two completely different playbooks collide. Trump plays to the crowd, to the spectacle. Carney plays to the system, slow, structural, deeply strategic. One relies on emotion, the other on patience. And right now, patience might just be winning. By the time Washington realizes how the numbers line up, it might already be too late. Because the tariff trap isn't about headlines or political points. It's about economic positioning, who controls production, who owns the value chain, who can withstand the storm. And on that front, Canada's latest budget might be far more than a policy document. It might be a blueprint for quietly rewriting the rules of North American trade. And that's the part no one saw coming.